You are listening to the Cookbook Love podcast with Maggie Green, episode number 377.
Welcome to the Cookbook Love podcast, a podcast that celebrates cookbook readers, buyers, collectors, writers, and clubs. And now your host, cookbook author, culinary dietitian, and cookbook writing coach, Maggie Green.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. How's everybody doing today? Happy Thanksgiving for my listeners in the U.S. I hope you're having a great day or have had a great day if you're listening to this after Thanksgiving. It's a fun time of year. A lot of food, family, friends, meals, turkey. We smoked turkeys yesterday and we're headed to my sister's house today. My children are all in town, and we are looking forward to also playing some golf tomorrow. So it's a great weekend. Get outdoors, be inside, enjoy each other's company, and, of course, have a great meal. I'm grateful for every one of you who listen, grateful for everybody who emails, who I chat with related to the podcast, and I want to thank you all so much for everything you've done to support and promote the show to family and friends. And just, again, thank you for that. We're coming on to the end of the year. I've got a lot of great episodes coming up, a lot of interviews to share with you and to talk all about fun things in the kitchen and the way that we can eat better, eat well, and even some dessert books coming up for the month of December. Okay, so today on the show, I'm excited to have an interview with Rachel Riggs. She's the author of In Good Health, Uncomplicated Allergen-Aware Recipes for a Nourished Life. Rachel was a specialty food shop owner when her life was upended by chronic illness. She was forced to embrace a shift in her diet and was inspired to develop this collection of recipes that highlights seasonal produce, her Southern California sensibilities, and transforming dietary restrictions into culinary opportunities. This cookbook spans everyday meals and special occasions and includes 77 recipes that are free from common trigger foods such as dairy, gluten, legumes, shellfish, peanuts, nightshades, and more. In Good Health provides people who have a dysregulated immune system, chronic illness, and food sensitivities with a lovely, delicious, simple repertoire of easy-to-prepare, nutrient-dense cuisine that is as delicious as it is nourishing. A couple of things that we talk about in the show is Rachel's philosophy about what we can eat and moving toward looking at food as an opportunity rather than a list of things that she can't eat. And also how Rachel managed her stamina and energy with her chronic illness and still was able to develop recipes and write a cookbook. So this was a great interview. Really appreciate Rachel coming on the show, and I hope you enjoy hearing all about her new book, In Good Health. So without further delay, let's dive into the interview with Rachel Riggs. Hi, Rachel. Welcome to the Cookbook Love podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes, so excited that you're here to talk all about your brand new book. But before we get started, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I was a specialty food shop owner when my circumstances changed. I became unwell and began to search for answers when an integrative doc suggested a really strict elimination diet. So that proved to be trickier than I expected. And so initially it wasn't my intention to write a book, but in eliminating so many foods, for anybody who hasn't done an elimination diet, gluten, grain, dairy, refined sugar, nightshades in my case, soy, shellfish. I mean, just really a huge swath of foods. And so, as a specialty food shop owner, I had all the best foods at my fingertips and the best representation of each food, right? The best of one type of cheese, and we sold wine too, and just having all those things and suddenly having them taken away. So initially, I started developing recipes simply to feed myself and my husband food that didn't feel punitive. I searched for resources, and I think that's the most important thing when you're faced with something like this and making a huge change to your diet. I think the most important thing you can do is first find a resource that speaks to you. But I wasn't able to do that. And I think part of that is because um, I live in Southern California and I have those kinds of sensibilities, a lot of fresher food, brighter foods, more vibrant food. And books in this particular genre, like clean, as they say, or paleo, anti-inflammatory, are often really meat centric. And I do eat meat, but sometimes they can be really meat centric and a lot of brown food and a lot of adaptations of classic foods. So that just wasn't my jam. So I started creating recipes, and I really expected it to be jail food, as they say. I mean, real, or as we say around here, my husband and I joke a lot about that. I mean, we just fully anticipated that's what it would be. And I really surprised myself. And so as I started turning out recipes and dishes that were really good, I came to understand that it needed to be a book, that there were a lot of other people in my position that also couldn't find resources. And also because I knew that the dishes I was creating were unique to my book. And so, yeah. And so it ended up being a book, but that wasn't the original intention.
Yeah. Yeah. And you actually, like you said, they weren't adaptations of something else. You started this really from scratch, no
Yep.
pun intended, after
Yeah.
you looked at all the things you had to eliminate and then building your own recipe and repertoire of recipes so that you could actually feed yourself.
Yeah. Everything was built from the ground up. And yeah, ultimately, so that was the start of things, but ultimately I did find that I feel a lot better when I don't eat those foods.
Yeah.
So, whereas a lot of people start off and then they can add most of the foods back in, most of the foods that I eliminated in the beginning, I continue to eliminate. And they're all, and the book doesn't include any of them. So, yeah, I mean, I'm really proud of the fact that I've been able to eliminate a lot of foods in the book without it being like so overt, right?
Yeah.
I don't think you would necessarily notice
Right. And I
that
think
they're
something you said in
missing.
your introduction that really spoke to me is that you really want this book also to celebrate what's included rather than what's omitted.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you
I
just
mean,
look at the pictures or what you've just said, a lot of color, a lot of fresh vegetables, there is still meat, a lot of flavor, things that might really surprise people when they hear that you had been challenged with this elimination diet and still eat a lot that way today.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what it's like to be prescribed this and not be able to find the resource, but then knowing that you've actually created a resource now that can help people in this particular area.
Yeah, I mean, I think the book offers a lot of solutions, not just for one kind of person. Lots and lots of people are gluten-free these days. More people have now gone fully grain-free. Refined sugar. I mean, people are just much more aware of inflammatory foods and more health conscious, setting themselves up for better aging. I mean, for whatever reason, everybody has their own reason, but there's a lot more people who are conscious of that now. And so I think the book can offer a wide variety of solutions. And the solution might just be that you have a raging sweet tooth and you need to find a new way to satisfy that sweet tooth. And the book contains a lot of cakes that are made with almond flour and maple syrup. So no refined sugar, and then the almond flour and the eggs give it a lot of protein. And so they're just inherently really satisfying, don't spike your blood sugar, don't make you crave more. And so, yeah, I mean, I think the book offers a lot of solutions.
Yeah. And this is the time of year when we're in the holiday season. People are cooking more for guests, perhaps, taking food perhaps to meals, or maybe having people over, or wanting to send a gift or gift something to people for the holidays. Let's talk a little bit about maybe a cook that's listening that knows that they need to prepare something maybe for a holiday meal. What kind of tips would you give to them if they know that maybe someone's trying to eat so that maybe it's less inflammation, or they've heard that someone's gluten-free?
Mhm.
What advice would you give to them?
Well, that's like really on my mind right now. It was on my mind when I was creating the book, but obviously much more so now as we are entering the holiday season. And I think that omitting a number of ingredients is paradoxically a recipe for inclusion. So, the book does that. But I think that, well, I mean, I think that's the key
Yeah.
is eliminating a number of things, because even if you don't, like if you're having a big gathering, even if you don't have any dietary restrictions, chances are somebody at the table does. And I'm really conscious of just how daunting that can be. And also even just keeping track of it. Aunt so and so doesn't eat gluten, right? Is that still true? And so doesn't eat dairy. Keeping track of those things is a lot. I mean, hosting a gathering in itself is a lot. And then when you add these extra components, it just gets really daunting. So all of those things are really important to me, including people. The fact that everybody deserves to have a birthday cake on their birthday. All of those things were just top of mind
Yeah.
when I was creating the recipes.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of interesting that you said, and it is true that even though you're including less ingredients, it actually broadens the number of people that perhaps could eat it, because it is quite possible you might have a guest that never really expressed the fact that they maybe couldn't have a certain thing. Maybe they just would prefer to go to someone's house, and they can kind of tell from what's on the table what they're able to eat. But if you bring something that is free of a lot of ingredients, then it does open up the possibility that everybody could eat it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Maggie, is I think a lot of people just want to be a gracious guest
Yes,
and wouldn't
exactly.
let anybody know.
Right.
And that means people often eat beforehand
Yes.
or bring a little something with them, and they don't get the full experience of being a guest or being included. So yeah, all of that stuff is so, so important to me. And it's just, many more people have restrictions these
Yeah.
days.
Yeah. So in the soup chapter, I see a recipe for porcini mushroom soup. There's also a delicious looking creamy coconut carrot soup, a creamy cauliflower soup. I can't help but think that if you're having guests and you're having a size group that you would be able to prepare soup, any of those would be delicious options for a starter or something for a holiday meal.
Yeah, it's funny, all the soups in the book are creamy soups. They're all blended and are generally just like a pot of vegetables with coconut milk that get blended into a creamy, luxurious soup, even though they don't really start off that way. So yeah, I mean, I think that anything in the book can be served to most audiences. And yeah, and like you mentioned, the porcini soup has a sort of subtle elegance to it because it's finished with cream sherry. So it has that really heady scent of cream sherry, if you're familiar with that. And
Mhm.
so it just elevates it a little bit. But all the soups I think are suitable to serve guests for
Right.
sure.
Yeah. And then, of course, side dishes. We can't talk about Thanksgiving, Christmas holidays without talking about side dishes. I always say I think side dishes are kind of um, the
The
star of the
star.
show this
I
time of year.
agree.
Yes, yes. So there's so many here. Which one? Let's see. Let's talk a little bit about. There's a rutabaga mash. There's a garlic mashed cauliflower, um, charred broccoli with a tahini sauce, and also one that looks delicious: the roasted Brussels sprouts with blood oranges and sweet white balsamic.
So there are enough recipes in the book that are really suited for Thanksgiving to a symbol of full Thanksgiving meal. There is a cranberry relish. It's a fresh relish, so it doesn't require cooking. It's super fast to just zip up in the food processor. And that's cool because you can make it a day or two in advance. It's fresh. It contains a ton of nutrients. It just brings up certain brightness to the table that is often lacking at Thanksgiving when we're eating all those heavy dishes. So there is a cranberry relish in the book. There's also a haricot vert with toasted hazelnuts and orange. So again, very kind of festive and appropriate for Thanksgiving or Christmas. The vegetable mash that you mentioned, the rutabaga, there are actually 3 vegetable mashes in the book, and they are unique in that instead of boiling the vegetables, whatever they may be, because there's 3 different styles, right? But instead of boiling the vegetables in water and then pouring the water along with the nutrients away, they are simmered gently in coconut milk and then just blended right there in the pot. Nothing's poured away. It's all just contained. And they're all blended with coconut milk, and they're really good. And the same, even though there's not a potato, there's no mashed potato recipe in the book because potatoes are nightshades, but you can follow those same principles and make like a garlic mashed potato using coconut milk. And it's like a righteous mashed potato, even though there's no dairy, no butter. It does make a really good mashed potato.
Yeah, sounds delicious. So let's talk a little bit about the sweets, because I know that this was something that you are very proud of about this book related to what you mentioned. Sweets or cakes made with almond flour and maple syrup. And it might surprise people the breadth and the depth and the types of things that are in this chapter. And I think this time of year, this is something people are thinking about also. So tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about this section of the book.
Sure. So there are a number of cakes, but before we get to the cakes, I think somebody in my position who doesn't eat a lot of food, well, I'm looking for things that are giftable too, right?
Yeah.
And cake, you might not want to bake somebody a whole cake. So there are tahini truffles in the book, and I think those are a standout in that everybody is crazy about them. They hold up in the fridge for like a month. You can pack them up for gifting, set them out on a table, like they're just kind of all purpose, and they're made with tahini and 100% cacao, and they're just, yeah, that's a really good thing to have at the holidays or year round, really. But the cakes in the book, they're all made with almond flour and maple syrup, and that's challenging, right? Because almond flour is so dense and maple syrup is, well, liquid instead of using sugar and getting that beautiful crumb from sugar and flour. And so they're a lot more challenging to make, but they, yeah, I think there's some really great cakes in the book and a lot of really good chocolate cakes, and various versions of the chocolate cakes. I do recommend Valrhona cocoa. It has a lot of flavor and really helps make those cakes extra special. But yeah, there are a number of cakes in the book, chocolate cakes and otherwise. And then there is like there's a lot of coconut milk ganache in various ways, thick spreadable ganache, but also like a thinner pourable ganache that you just pour over the top of the cake and let it drape down the sides. All of this stuff is made without refined sugar
Yep.
and any dairy.
Yep. And you have the tahini truffles if you're thinking about like Christmas cookies or a box of treats, the tahini truffles. I see chocolate dipped coconut macaroons. There's also pecan pie truffles with salted caramel and toasted pecans. And
That's
then,
very holiday like,
yes,
yeah.
yeah. And then I think also if you're having guests, there's a cinnamon walnut coffee cake.
Yeah, actually, that's a great thing to make for house guests to just kind of have
Yeah,
out on your counter for
yeah,
people to help themselves
yeah.
too. Yeah, so it's not all chocolate. The pecan pie truffles are really good because that's my favorite style of pie, but we know that it's like loaded with corn syrup and sadly makes me feel really awful.
Yeah.
So these truffles are dipped in chocolate, and the shell of the chocolate is what kind of holds them all together. But when you bite into them, there's a really soft center that's made with like a date caramel and toasted pecans, and it's really good.
Sounds wonderful. When you're cooking, it's not only what you're able to eat or not. There's a lot involved in cooking, from getting ingredients to staying in the kitchen, seeing a recipe through, finishing it, cleaning up. How does it work with someone if they are suffering from a chronic illness to do all of this work?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on your level of stamina and functionality. I've been mostly housebound for 12 years now, so I'm somebody who has been pretty profoundly affected by illness. So, I mean, I my husband is a large part of, right?
Yeah.
Having somebody to help me get groceries and sometimes do dishes, that's part of what makes this possible, quite honestly. But
Yeah.
I make it a priority. So, in developing the recipes and stuff, you figure I have to feed myself anyway. And in this case, it's myself and my husband. So um, I just paced myself oftentimes at the pace of, just preparing regular meals throughout the day. So whereas a lot of people get that book contract and they have 1 year and it's a very frantic year, I did things a little bit more slowly because it wasn't until I was halfway through the recipes for a book that I even sought representation and a publisher and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So I was able to pace myself a little bit. And so many times, whatever I had planned, whatever recipe I was developing, I knew that would become my dinner too, right? So I'm not making dinner and preparing or developing a recipe. It's serving, dual purpose.
Yeah, and I think that's actually, when you're working on a cookbook, I think it's the smart way to do it. Unless, of course, you're working on a book that, let's say it's a cookie book, you obviously can't eat cookies every day for
You
for
can?
dinner. But if you're
Wait,
doing,
you can't?
yeah, I don't. Well, no, maybe you can. Just say, if you're doing savory foods, I always thought it made the most sense to develop and work on your recipes in the context of what you're cooking for yourself every
Yeah.
day, anyway.
Well, and the seasonality of that too, right?
Yes,
Because
yes,
cranberries, you can't develop a cranberry
no,
recipe in the summer. In fact, this year I noticed I couldn't even find frozen cranberries. I really had to wait until
yeah.
November to get them. So the natural seasonality, is also just a nice kind of, yeah,
Yeah, and then you
addition.
can, like you said, then you can feed yourself, you can feed your family, and it to me, it makes perfect sense. So
Yeah.
when you were working on these recipes then, even before you had your contract, what kinds of things did you do to capture the notes and to, like, keep track of everything so that you were really making the best use of your time to not only feed yourself, but work on recipes at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really organized.
Yeah.
So I didn't do anything. I mean, I did everything with intention,
Mhm.
right? So everything was absolutely organized. I didn't want to come back and clean everything up later. I mean, there's a lot of editing involved, many rounds, but I didn't want to be sloppy about it. I wanted to be as tidy as possible.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I took
And the
my
more that
time.
I always say, the better things are sent to an editor anyway, the easier the whole process is. And it is easier on us as authors when we do it right. Try to do it as right as possible the first time. It just makes the whole process all along the way easier.
I do want to mention the metric conversions
Yes.
because originally I turned in a manuscript that didn't have them. I actually changed publishers. So I turned in my manuscript to my first publisher and they asked, no, maybe it was right before I turned it in. So imagine that I've already developed all the recipes. And so I'm done cooking all this stuff and I've got
Yes.
77 recipes. And my publisher said, we want metric conversions. And that's because, the book deal was led by their UK division,
Mm.
meaning like the UK division saw this book in my proposal and they were nuts about it. And we knew we needed those conversions. So imagine they wanted that and I had to go back and do the conversions for 77 recipes. So that was a little awkward, but it's like the most fortuitous thing to happen along the way because I was very late to the party when it comes to weighing out my baking ingredients, and it totally changed my life. So I really became adept at doing that. I shortened the prep time on my cakes. I can now get any one of my cakes into the oven in 10 minutes flat.
Hmm. Hmm.
And there's also a learning curve in the metric conversions because a lot of the conversions you see online are not accurate. And so I did every single one in my book. I have hand weighed myself. I just did not want to risk anybody ever procuring ingredients, spending the time to make one of my recipes and not have it turn out. So that was a last minute thing that I was mortified about originally, right? I mean, I just was like, what?
Yeah.
But it turned out to be the best thing
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
it's safe to say if someone bakes the recipes with using metric or imperial measurements, they'll get great results either way.
Yeah, I mean, I do talk about, I try to not make any assumptions about what kind of skill level people bring to the table. Especially if you're talking about a healthy cookbook, I think it's more likely that somebody's gonna be preparing food from this book that maybe doesn't cook. If their doctor says, hey, you need to make these kind of changes, they might be forced into the kitchen, right? So I don't want to make any of those assumptions. And so even, for example, the empirical measurements, um, I talk about how to measure almond flour in a way that's really consistent. I don't expect anybody to know. In fact, some of my recipe testers, were packing the flour, right? So, I
Yeah.
mean, I just learned so much from them. And I was like, no, my gosh, you could end up adding an extra cup of almond flour in
Yeah.
the process. So I try to address as much of that stuff as possible.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And I think for baking, I totally agree with you. I think it's faster to get things finished if we're weighing and not using measuring cups. And
Yeah.
it's just,
Well, and the other thing is, in my case, you're baking with a lot of sticky things like
mhm,
maple syrup or sometimes almond butter. So you've got to scrape those things out of the cup, and then you've got to wash that cup. And if you're weighing things, you're not scraping, you're not wasting product, you're not washing cups. I mean, I'm still astounded when I make like a little pour here, pour there, and it's done,
yeah.
and it feels magical to me. And I'm looking forward to doing some tutorials for anybody who is still resistant to doing that.
Yeah, and I think I was even over at Aldi last week, and I mean that you can find kitchen scales in a lot of different places, a
Yeah.
lot of different price points. I don't think it's a barrier to entry anymore to get a nice little
Yeah.
digital scale.
Well, I have the OXO one that's all over Amazon and it's $22, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah,
So, and that thing, I mean, it keeps ticking. It's had a lot of use. So,
yeah,
yeah, I don't think it's cost prohibitive or anything like that.
yeah. So, what about the writing part and keeping up with the manuscript and the back and forth about that? How did you do with that related to your stamina?
Well, gosh,
And I ask you
I
this
get,
question because
yeah,
there's possibly someone listening that's like
yeah,
maybe thinking they can't do a project like this because of a similar thing. So I think you're the perfect person to perhaps shed some light or give some advice or
yeah.
um,
Well,
through
this
the
whole
this
this whole book
podcast.
was written from bed. So, I mean, if I can do it, I really mean that anybody can do it. So, I stepped away a lot of times. I mentioned that I had a publisher and I changed publishers and things like that. So it also allowed me um a chance to step away from all the front matter, not the recipes so much, right? But the front matter. And anytime you're writing something and you step away and you return with a fresh eye and a new lens, I think it just turns out a lot better. So when I think about um, the people that are like really racing through the process, I think there's a certain exhilaration in that too, right? And sometimes that's just the deal. Your publisher needs something quickly. But in my case, being able to take breaks here and there, step away, I made a better book because of it for sure. And one of the things initially I wasn't even going to touch on my health. I didn't belabor any of that. I didn't get into it a lot,
Yeah.
but I just, that was really tricky for me. How much to say? I wanted it to be relatable to anybody else in my situation, but I didn't want to alienate people. It was really tricky for me. So stepping away and returning, I also wanted people to be able to connect with me and for it not to be just a book of recipes and not have a personal behind the recipes. So yeah, I think my situation, Maggie, may be fairly unique to
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
but I do want to say that anybody can do it and anybody can alter their process to suit them. Whatever they're imagining, make it work for you, you know?
Yeah. And that goes along also with anything that you did to build your brand, to promote your book. It all had to be in a way that worked for you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a prolific poster and I just can't be. I don't have the stamina to do that. And that was also, that's a bummer because there's a lot of book promo and a lot of things that publishers expect from us. And so that was hard. It made it harder for me to get a book deal. But yeah, you got to make your situation work for you. Everybody's story is unique.
Yeah. But it didn't make it impossible to get a book deal.
No, it didn't. But this has been, I will say, from start to finish. And when I say start, I mean like that moment that I changed my diet and didn't know how I was going to do it to now, it's been 10 years.
Yeah.
So it's been a long project,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
mean, really, it's a better book because of it,
That's right.
you know. So
That's right. I think that's an excellent way to think about it. When you're talking about routines, then, and like meal prep and writing, like talk
uh-huh.
about some of the things that you did, especially related to meal prep and cooking, that really helped you to accomplish all the tasks that you wanted to accomplish in cooking and things that make life easier in the kitchen for you.
Sure. And there aren't a lot of them, but I think they were all really critical. And so washing greens in advance, I do a lot of salads and a lot of main dish salads in the book. Um, and so washing greens in advance, it's not just so that when it's time to make dinner, it's more of an assembly situation. It's not just to lighten the load, but if you wash your greens right before you use them, they're waterlogged, right? So always wash and spin them. I'm a huge lover of salad spinners. I own multiple of them. I'd own even more if I had room in my fridge. But so I love those. But washing your greens sort of in the morning, even if you're heading out the door for work, it allows them to cool down and crisp up and be ready for dinner. So I do a lot of that. Dressings are all made in advance because almost any dressing is going to be better because it's been made in advance. The flavors have time to, meld. And then I think maybe the biggest thing is having proteins in the freezer. So I think it's really common to have frozen food in the freezer that you thaw and cook, but I do it in reverse. And I'm a huge proponent of that. So I only like to cook fresh, never frozen produce. And and I cook it and I then get it into the freezer. So all these main dish salads, for example, if you need chicken breast that you're going to shred on top, you can just pull out a little wet jar of exactly enough chicken breast. You can thaw it. You don't have to heat it and shred it over a salad. So having both salmon actually and chicken almost
Cooked
always
and then frozen. Yes.
cooked and then frozen.
Yes.
That's not only the key to making the recipes in the book, but it's the key to, slamming dinner on the table. And
Yeah.
we've all been there a billion times. So everything's kind of built around the protein, right? So having that in the freezer
That's an
has been
excellent
really,
tip, and it's interesting because usually when you think about frozen protein, it's uncooked protein. Then you got to thaw it, then
yeah.
you got to cook it. But this way, it's just thawed, and since it's already cooked, it's ready to go.
Well, I find the textures better too. So especially salmon,
Mm-hmm.
I find that frozen salmon is mealy. And so by cooking it really just to temp, right? Like I temp all of my proteins, by the way.
Yeah.
Proteins are way too expensive to overcook them. And so I temp them all, I get them in the freezer. And when you thaw salmon that's been frozen that way, it's really beautifully fresh, just like it was just cooked. So, yeah, so it's about texture a lot for me too.
Yeah, it's great. Very good. So this is a podcast, obviously, all about cookbooks. One of my, wrapping things up, one of my favorite questions to ask my guests is about cookbooks. And if you have a favorite cookbook and what that cookbook is.
I continue to buy cookbooks because I'm such a cookbook lover, but I read them like novels, as so many of us do, because I mostly can't cook from them because of all the ingredient restrictions. But I still buy them and I still love them. But the one that I get the most use out of, and it's not exactly a cookbook, but the Flavor Bible, and you may be familiar with it. Do you have one? The
I think
Flavor
I do,
Bible?
yes.
So I love it so much. I mean, I could even just be sitting here going, well, I'll give you an example. The asparagus soup in the book.
Uh-huh.
I knew that I wanted to develop an asparagus soup. It's so quintessentially spring and Easter and that whole, um, stretch of springtime. But when I think of lemon and asparagus, I just think, oh, it's so cliche. So I was able to go to the Flavor Bible and see, well, what were they doing with asparagus? And it was suggested to use lime instead. And so I did end up using lime in my soup and I love it. And it's just enough to add, it's unique, just a little bit of uniqueness. And it also suggested cayenne. So the
Mm,
soup is finished with a little bit of cayenne too. And it just kept it from being cliche. So
yeah.
it's really a resource, but I often go there just out of curiosity. Even if I'm not cooking, I'm looking for something unique or a new way to think about a certain ingredient. And so that is the thing, though it's not an actual cookbook, that I use the most.
Yeah, no, it's a great resource. And I think for people that like to cook, if you're looking for flavor profiles for a certain country, perhaps, or like Rachel said, if you're developing recipes and you're looking to make a new twist on something, I think that book is excellent for the pairings and the way that different flavors go together that we don't often think of. So that's an
If you're
excellent
developing recipes,
recommendation. It's
or
great.
if you're even just like a really inventive home cook and you're
Yeah.
not developing recipes, right? I do wish they'd update it. I don't know what year it was published, but it's at least, I don't know, 15 years old or something. And so a lot of ingredients that are super ubiquitous now, like quinoa, aren't in the book. So I would love to see an update. So if anybody listening would like to update,
Yeah, and that was
please.
written by Andrew Dornenberg and Karen Page.
Do you know who they are? Are they chefs that
Well, it
you're
was
familiar
published in
with?
2008. No,
Okay.
I think they also wrote another book kind
There
of
was a
related to
sequel.
writing menus, I feel like.
I'm
I don't know if
picturing
they
a
maybe
cover
did
with like yellow, and
a
there was a
wine book.
follow-up with a different kind of theme. Um, I think it was baking related. It was helping ratio. Is it called ratio or
Yeah, it might have
ratios?
been Ratio. There's
Yeah,
also one called Becoming a Chef, is when they wrote with recipes and reflections from chefs. So they talked
yeah,
about chefs, and then they talked about some of the flavor profiles that they use, and
yeah,
so that was a good one as well that they worked on. But yeah, that's been 2008. But there are probably some flavors that maybe still need to be added, but they have it listed on Amazon still as a bestseller.
I bet.
Yep.
I bet it's still a great resource.
Yes.
Absolutely. All the classics are there. Yeah, I love it. It's a great book.
Yeah. I always think it'd be fun to write a book like that. They say that one was 8 years in the making. Um,
Oh, and
it,
that's because they have resourced so many chefs and they name them,
uh-huh.
so and so chef from per se.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. It's a beautiful book. So that's a great example of the types of things that we love to talk about here. Not only your beautiful book, Rachel, but also the books that have informed your journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the holiday season. I am so excited to present this book to the audience, and your story, your way of cooking, and your way of writing books that maybe seems to be a little bit different or unusual. But I think the most interesting thing about it is that we can all take our own life and the life we're living and turn it into something that helps other people have a better kitchen experience. And there's no doubt in my mind that you've done this with your book. And I'd love for people to be able to connect with you online if there's a way they can do so.
Yes, I'm on Instagram at the.rachel.riggs. I've got a Substack newsletter, and I would love to connect with people. And I get a lot of emails from people who share their unique circumstances with me, and sometimes just have a lot of questions about um, how to make certain dietary changes. And I welcome all that stuff. I return every email that I get. So yeah, please find me online if you're there, and I look forward to it.
Great. Well, we want to thank you so much for coming on the show again to talk about your book, In Good Health.
Maggie, thank you so much for having
You're
me.
welcome. And I hope you have a wonderful holiday season and a wonderful 2026.
Yeah, thank you so much. You too.
Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. Again, all the links can be found in the show notes at www.cookbooklove.co. And if you are interested in writing a cookbook of your own, please check out the free cookbook writing masterclass called How to Get Paid to Write a Cookbook. It is designed specifically for food or nutrition experts, and you can check that out at www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/free. So that's it for today's episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. This is your host, Maggie Green. And until next time, have a great day and keep loving your cookbooks.
Thanks for listening to the Cookbook Love podcast. You can find out more information at www.cookbooklove.co.